أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين أما بعد. I hope everybody had a lovely Eid, inshallah. And today we're carrying on with our subject of zakat. Today we're talking about who is eligible to receive zakat. This is obviously one of the most important subjects in zakat because well, it's twofold. One, if you're the one giving the zakat, if you give it to the wrong person, then you must pay it again. And second of all, if you are someone who's receiving zakat, but you're not actually eligible to receive the zakat, you will have to pay that zakat back, so that money doesn't become halal for you. So that's why recipients of zakat is an important subject. Now, the following are eligible recipients of zakat. 1, the needy. Now, there is a difference between a person who is needy and a person who is destitute. The needy is what we call the faqir. The destitute is someone who is miskeen. So there is a difference. The needy is who? That is someone who does not own the zakat threshold for assets with a propensity to increase. Okay, so gold, silver, money, trading chattel, right? So these things, if he doesn't have these things at the threshold for zakat, then we call them needy, whether or not they have other forms of wealth. Or he owns the zakat threshold, but it is engaged in basic needs, right? So if we're going to read number 76 here, it makes a good distinction. The zakat threshold is of two types. One, that which is used to determine whether the individual's assets meet the zakat threshold, and hence if zakat is payable, and in what amount. Okay? And number B is the test used to determine whether the person is an eligible recipient of zakat. So there's a difference. There's two different thresholds in zakat. One is the giving threshold, and two is the receiving threshold. It's possible that a person doesn't give zakat, but he's also not able to receive zakat. Okay? That which is used to determine whether the individual's assets meet the zakat threshold, and hence if zakat is payable, and in what amount. Here we only consider assets that have a propensity to increase due to their inherent nature. We talked about this. We said, what is this? Gold, silver, trading chattel, and grazing livestock. Okay. Grazing livestock means the livestock are eating outside in the field. You're not paying to feed them, because when you pay to feed livestock, they're not increasing you in wealth. They are decreasing you. Other considerations, such as these assets being offset by debt balances, are discussed in the text above. Okay, so we already talked about what debt does. You remove the debt and then you check if you have a zakat threshold. Now B, the test used to determine whether the person is eligible recipient of zakat. Here it is not a condition that the assets have a propensity to increase. Okay, hence all assets are considered. For example, land that is not held for resale, garments, means of transport, your car, houses, etc. However, if any of these assets are employed to fulfill one's basic needs, they are not included in the calculation. So we're talking about a second car, a second house, right? These don't make you give zakat, because a car doesn't increase in wealth. So we don't count it as silver or gold, right? We don't count it as trading chattel as long as you didn't buy it with the intention of selling it. So if you have a second car or a third car, that doesn't make you give zakat. However, it'll stop you from receiving zakat. For example, one's primary place of residence. This is going to be your basic needs, right? The second type of threshold, right, is also used to determine the obligation of sadaqatul fitr and ritual sacrifice, the sacrifice on Eid al-Adha, right? So we're not looking at whether you're eligible for zakat when we say you need to sacrifice an animal. We're also not looking at whether you're eligible for zakat, eligible to give zakat when we're talking about sadaqatul fitr. What we're doing is we look at whether you have a second car, whether you have a bunch of clothes other than your basic needs, right? Sometimes a person has like 10 t-shirts. That's way too many, right? So you calculate all of these things. So the threshold for sadaqatul fitr and ritual sacrifice, we count that as lower. Why? Because we include assets which we don't include in the calculation of the zakat threshold in here. Okay, so who can receive zakat? The needy person. All right, but it is engaged in basic needs, even if it reaches many thousands of dirhams, such as a place of primary residence, clothes one wears, tools used in one's profession, and books of knowledge for the one who needs them to become skilled, or for memorization and verification. If these assets are not engaged in basic needs, right? So we're talking about a person who, other than his basic needs, he does not reach the zakat threshold, okay? If these assets are not engaged in basic needs, it is unlawful to take zakat. Even though he might not be able to give zakat, he's unable to take zakat. And it also makes it mandatory to pay other than zakat, such as sadaqatul fitr, right? And the charity, the charity of Eid al-Fitr, and the ritual sacrifice, right? The qurbani, and maintenance payments for relatives of unmarriageable kin. What does this mean? Unmarriageable kin is the mahram, those you are not allowed to marry, like your daughter, like your mother, grandmother. So these people, if they are needy, and you are somebody who maybe you're not rich enough to pay zakat, but you have extra garments, extra clothes and whatnot, we count you as being somewhat wealthy, and you will have to take care of these ladies. Number 2, the destitute. So we said the first one was the needy person, right? The faqir, the needy. The faqir, he doesn't have gold, silver and cash, but he has assets, right? And we're not talking about, nowadays we're just talking about like a second car. He has maybe a second house. Maybe he just has a lot of clothes. Maybe he has like 20 pairs of shoes. That's a problem nowadays. People have way too many shoes, way too many clothes. You have to count these, okay? Number 2, the destitute. That is someone who does not own anything and must ask for sustenance and clothing. One moment. The destitute person, the miskin, is someone who does not own anything and he must ask for sustenance and clothing. So he doesn't have enough food, he doesn't have enough clothes. In contrast to the needy, it is permissible for the destitute to ask for money. So the other person we were talking about, the faqir, he's not allowed to ask for money, right? But a destitute person, he's allowed to ask for money if they are unable to work to earn a livelihood, okay? It is permissible to give zakat to someone for whom seeking charity is unlawful after he has become needy, okay? So it is permissible to give zakat to someone for whom seeking charity is unlawful, which means the faqir, but also it can mean the destitute person who has enough to eat for the day. Because a destitute person, right? Imagine a homeless person, as long as he's got like a couple pounds to be able to eat that day and to have clothes on him that day, then he's not even allowed to carry on asking for money. So begging in Islam is something that's extremely frowned upon, and it's only allowed for someone who literally has nothing to eat that day, right? I.e., someone who has sustenance for today and more, okay, after he has become needy. So 3, zakat workers are given a moderate amount to the extent of their work and what suffices them and their assistants. However, this must not exceed half of what they have collected. So, back in the early days, during the Ottoman time, during the other Khalifats, there would be zakat workers, usually employed by the state or the governor. And these zakat workers, they would go around and they would collect people's zakat. So they would go to the farmers, they would collect their sheep, they would collect their cows, whatever they need, and transporting these, having them slaughtered and given to the poor, having the money distributed to the poor, was these people's job. And because it's their job, they will get paid from what they collect, but it needs to be a moderate amount. So we're not going to do dhulm to them and not give them their rights, but neither are we going to make them rich from this job, right? So moderate amount for their work. So whatever the average hourly rate is, basically, we can say, whatever the average daily rate is for a person doing this type of job and their assistants, however many employees there are. But it must not exceed half of what the zakat is. Okay, this is obviously to stop what's it called? Corruption. Now, number 4, those in debt and do not possess assets whose value in excess of their debt reaches the zakat threshold. Giving to such a person is better than giving to a needy person who is not in debt. Now, who can receive zakat? Those in debt and do not possess assets whose value is in excess of their debt reaches the zakat threshold, okay? Giving to such a person is better than giving to a needy person who is not in debt. Why? Because a person with debt has someone chasing after them, right? So by giving it to that person, at least you're saving him from being chased after by the debtor. So you're saving him from basically, either going to jail, being dragged through courts and everything. So giving it to someone who owes money is better than giving it to someone who doesn't owe any money, because the person who owes money is in minus, right? Number 5, those engaged in Islamic military operations and cut off from the Muslim army and are unable to rejoin them due to poverty resulting from a loss of money, transport, or something else. These people can receive zakat. A traveler, that is someone who has assets but not with him, okay? This is regardless of whether he is in or outside his homeland, and regardless of whether he has debts owed to him that he is unable to recover. It is not permissible for him to take more than what he needs, though, okay? So you may be rich, but if you don't have your money with you, then we can call you rich all you want, you're still poor and you need money, right? And the zakat payer may pay individuals from all or some of the eligible categories, okay? You can give it to just one person, you can give it to all of these different people, even if it is one person from any one of these categories. The recipient must be given ownership of that which is discharged as zakat, not merely permitted to benefit from it, okay? He must now own it all. It is not sufficient to feed someone as zakat, yeah? Unless the recipient is given ownership of the food and one intends payment of zakat, okay? So feeding someone, so inviting them over, feeding them food and then saying, oh, this is my zakat, that's not allowed. But giving them, for example, wheat or flour or dates, and then intending that as zakat is allowed. So people who are not eligible to receive zakat, so ineligible recipients of zakat, let's Move these screens for me. That's better. So everything that does not involve giving an individual ownership, okay, including construction of a mosque. You are not allowed to collect zakat and open up a mosque with it. Bridge and irrigation system. B, repairing pathways. That's why, remember, we don't call zakat a tax, right? It's not a tax. A tax would go to the government, and the government would use it for roads and construction and bridges and irrigation systems and fixing potholes and whatnot. It's not a tax. You give it to a poor person, right? Construction of a mosque, bridge and irrigation system. B, repairing pathways, not allowed. Excavating a river, not allowed. Performance of Hajj, not allowed. Okay, you can't receive zakat just because you intend to go to Hajj, right? Jihad, not allowed. Shrouding for deceased, not allowed. Settling the death of the deceased. As for the death of a living person, it is permissible, okay? But a dead person's debts, you can't pay them off as zakat, because a dead person can't own any money, and you need to give them ownership of the money, yeah? As for the death of a living person, it is permissible to settle with zakat payments if it is with the instruction of the debtor, okay? In this case, the creditor collects the payments as a deputy of the needy debtor. Hence, a needy person has been given ownership of the zakat payment. If the debt is settled without instruction from the needy debtor, then the payment is not zakat, rather it is voluntary charity. So you need to make sure that you give him the ownership of this money, right? Number two, someone with whom there is a relationship of parturition. That just means father, son, right? Like his direct ancestors and descendants, okay? So you can't go up and you can't go down. You can't give zakat to your dad, to your mom, to granddad, to grandma. Neither can you give it to your son, to your grandchildren, to your daughter, to your, again, grandchildren. So even if the relationship arose outside of wedlock, even if it's a walad zina, the same applies to someone with whom he denies any relationship, obviously being he's lying about the relationship. Number three, a spouse. You cannot give zakat to your wife, even when she has been divorced 3 times and is in the post-marital waiting period. As long as that waiting period hasn't ended, we still consider the rules of, spousehood or whatever you want to call it, to be active. So you're not allowed to give her zakat. Someone who is not considered needy, possessing the zakat threshold. So you're not allowed to give this person zakat either. Who is this person? We said this is the someone who's not considered needy, possessing the zakat threshold from any type of asset, and the amount is not held for one's basic needs. So a rich person. This ruling does not apply to a traveler and a zakat worker. So even if the traveler is rich, like we said, he doesn't have his money with him. A zakat worker, even though he may be rich, right? He's not receiving zakat because he's needy. He's receiving zakat as payment for his work, okay? If a person gathers zakat on behalf of the needy from a group of people, it is permissible for the needy to take it, okay, even if they are no longer needy after receiving it, okay? So if it's a lot of money, the needy person may take that money, okay, and they may receive that money, they're not allowed to ask for it. Remember, a needy person can't ask for money. A destitute person can ask for money, but a needy person can't ask for money. But if the money has been gathered, then he may take from the money, even if it's so much that he's no longer needy after taking from that money, okay? A bride's possessions, including household furniture, clothing, and containers for usage, from that which are a necessity for those like her. So we're talking about culture, right? So in the Pakistani culture, it might be different. In a Turkish culture, it might be different. In a Yemeni culture, it might be different. For example, in the Turkish culture, it's a bit over the top. You'll have plates and cutlery for guests, and that'll be separate from your plates and cutlery that you use daily. You'll have separate sets for your tea, and you'll have a separate set for your coffee. So you won't drink tea in the things you drink your coffee in. And then even those will be separate for guests. So, you know, these things in the Turkish culture adds up to a whole kitchen full of things that is customary, which it's culturally necessary for her to have these things. Otherwise, people around her may see it as being out of the ordinary. In other cultures, it might be that not people don't really care about cutlery and spoons and forks and whatnot. So for that wife, for that bride to have excess of these stuff, right? That's not considered a basic need, right? So again, we look at your culture in this instance. Obviously, if you're using them daily, it doesn't matter if the culture or not, as long as you're using them, this will still be basic needs. We're talking about in excess of your basic needs. Now, what is beyond this from jewelry, containers, and objects by which adornment is intended, if their value reaches the zakat threshold, it means she is no longer needy, right? Even though she might not need to pay zakat, she's not able to receive zakat. The scholars differ over jewelry that is not made from gold or silver, like jewels and pearls, and is worn on festive occasions and to adorn herself for her husband, as to whether this is from her basic needs. I argue that it's not. But there are those that say it is basic needs. As for the one who possesses thousands of dirhams by the value of his weapons and horses that are necessary, okay, his house, even if it is big and in excess of his needs, and his stores and houses that are rented out, but their rental payments do not suffice him, he is considered needy, and it is permissible for him to take zakat. So Islam differs from like the Western idea of assets and being rich. So, you know, any Westerner would look at this person and say, this person's rich. He's got houses, he's got shops. You know, they look at the value of an individual, right? The value of an individual, and then they come up with billions and millions and trillions of dollars, right? Even though that person has no access to that money, right? So Islam looks at whether you have access to this money. You may have 10 different houses, but if they're all rented out and the rent isn't enough for you, you're still needy, right? If you have loads of weapons and horses, but you're using them, so you might be a commander and you're using it for your army and whatnot. Again, even though you're rich, you're not rich. You're needy. So basically, a person on the outset might look rich. He might have a bunch of shops and houses and whatnot. But if it's not enough for him and his basic needs, then he is needy. Number 5, the child of a person who is not needy. Now, pay attention to this one. This can get slightly confusing. It's not that confusing. The child of a person who is not needy. So if a person is not needy, you cannot give their child zakat. Okay? So Ahmed isn't needy. So Ahmed's son cannot receive zakat. Okay? Unless he's an adult. Then we don't count him as a child, right? In contrast, zakat may be paid to his following relations. So the not needy person's relations may be given zakat if they are needy. And who is that? The son who is a needy adult. So let's say Ahmed, he's not needy, but his son, which is an adult, he's 15, 16, 17, 18, right? He's an adult. He may still be given zakat, even though his dad's rich or his dad's not needy, right? The second one, his father. Even though Ahmed is rich, his father may still be given zakat, not by Ahmed, but by somebody else. Ahmed's wife may receive zakat. Even though Ahmed's rich, his wife may be poor. Ahmed can't give her zakat, but you can, right? The married daughter. Again, the person's rich. His daughter is married to somebody else. He's not allowed to give her zakat, but somebody else can, Okay. Married daughter, why? Because she's an adult and she's married off. So she's not, basically, she's split from the father. She's not the father's responsibility. E, child of a lady who is not needy. Okay. So even we're talking about men here. If it's a woman that's not needy, okay, her child can still receive zakat. Okay. Because a child should be taken care of by a man. Right. So ladies have it very simple. Basically, ladies almost never have to take care of anyone financially in Islam. That's also balanced out through inheritance. That's why women will take half of the inheritance of what the men get, because Islam puts pressure, not pressure, but Islam puts all the responsibility financially on men. Women financially have no responsibility over anyone. So even if the child does not have a father, okay? Number 6, you are not allowed to give zakat to a Hashamite, okay? From the descendants of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also close relatives. So we can read this really quick, but it doesn't really concern us that much. Just know that if they're Hashimis, right, you are not allowed to give them zakat if you know, right? Unless the scriptures invalidated their kinship. And those are the descendants of who? Abu Lahab. Okay, so Abu Lahab's, even though they're technically Hashimi, right, because the Quran invalidates their kinship, right, they may receive zakat. It is permissible to pay zakat to those among the descendants of Abu Lahab who converted to Islam, just as it is permissible to pay the descendants of Muttalib who converted. Yeah. Now, voluntary charity is permissible for Hashimis, so Sayyids may, Habibs and Sayyids may receive voluntary charity, as are the yields of appropriations, the waqfs, okay? So money that waqfs make, they're able to take. If the appropriator named them as beneficiaries, obviously whoever's giving the whatever it is as a waqf, he may name them to say, I'm giving this as a waqf, and Sayyids or Habibs may take from this, right? Number 7, a non-Muslim subject of the Islamic State. Okay, so he's non-Muslim, but he lives in the Islamic State legally. That's a dhimmi. It is permissible to give other, so you're not allowed to give them zakat. Okay, it needs to be a Muslim. So even though it's a dhimmi, you can't give them zakat. It is permissible to give other than zakat and teeths, ushur, to a non-Muslim subject. So you can't give zakat and you can't give your ushur. Ushur is another thing for farms and like fruits and vegetables that you get. You give ushur. A non-Muslim subject, even if it is a mandatory payment such as a vow, charity, expiation, and sadaqatul fitr. As for the unbeliever resident in non-Muslim lands, so a harbi, it is not permissible to pay any type of charity to him. Okay, even if he is visiting Muslim lands on assurance of temporary safety, so musta'min, so he's on a temporary visa, right? It is not permissible to pay any type of charity to him. So if we read 95, however, Ibn Abidin writes in respect of voluntary charity, okay, so that Imam Muhammad opined there is no impropriety, so you're allowed to, in the Muslim giving, there is no impropriety in the Muslim giving to or accepting a gift from the unbeliever, whether he is an unbeliever resident in non-Muslim lands or subject of the Islamic State. It has been narrated that the Prophet ﷺ sent 500 dinars, gold coins, to Mecca during a drought and instructed that they be given to Abu Sufyan bin Harb and Safwan bin Umayyah so that they may distribute them amongst the needy residents of Mecca. In addition, maintaining family ties is praiseworthy in every religion, and giving gifts to others is from noble character. So, even though over here it says you're not allowed to give non-Muslims that aren't living in an Islamic state charity, we see that Imam Muhammad says that it's fine. Okay? Now, if one paid zakat to someone thinking, based upon personal reasoning, okay, that he is eligible, and then it transpires that he is an unbeliever resident in non-Muslim lands, so a harbi, even if he's even if he's musta'man, so even if he's come as a visitor to Muslim lands, the zakat must be repaid. Okay, if it transpires that the recipient is not needy, so if you thought they were Muslim but they turned out to not be Muslim, you have to pay the zakat again. Okay, if it transpires that the recipient is not needy, or is a non-Muslim subject of the Islamic State, or he's a dhimmi, okay, so he lives in an Islamic state but he's a non-Muslim, right? He's not a visitor, he lives there, okay? Or that person is your father or your son or your wife, or he's a sayyid or a habib, or the zakat is not repaid, okay? Why? Because you used personal reasoning, okay? And when you use personal reasoning, you come to the conclusion that this person is eligible for zakat and you pay it. So there's no doubt, right? But if a person is an unbeliever, we say you still have to repay it, right? But if anything other than an unbeliever, okay, so they may be an unbeliever, but they're dhimmi, it might be your father, your son, your wife, it might be your sayyid. So you gave it to a needy person at night time, and you didn't even realize it was your dad or your son or your wife somehow, right? If zakat is paid without using personal reasoning to determine the recipient's eligibility, and without doubt about the recipient's eligibility, so you didn't have to use personal reasoning. You were walking on the street, you saw a person, you know, a homeless person, obviously homeless, outwardly homeless. You can tell their clothes are ripped, they haven't had a shower in ages. You can literally just tell that this person is a poor person, right? So you're not using personal reasoning, you just look at the person and you give them zakat, right? About it is not permissible if it transpires he is ineligible. Okay, so if it turns out that that person wasn't actually poor, right, then you must repay the zakat again. Why? Because you didn't use any personal reasoning. You should have used personal reasoning. Okay. However, if it is permissible if nothing becomes known to him. So you give your zakat to that person, you go home, it turns out that they're not eligible for zakat, but that news never reaches you. You never learn about that. That's fine. Right? So if one uses personal reasoning and pays zakat to someone, thinking he is an ineligible recipient, so you actually think this person is not eligible, but you still pay them zakat, right? Or one had doubt but did not inquire to apply personal reasoning, the payment is invalid until it transpires that the recipient was eligible, whereby it suffices him. So the role is flipped. So your zakat is not valid until you learn that he is poor, okay? If the recipient is sitting in the row of the needy, again, so he's sitting with the needy people, doing what they are doing, or he has the same outward appearance, or the needy person asked him for money, so he was begging for money and you gave, these causes take the place of applying personal reasoning, okay? As a result, if it transpires that the recipient is not needy, zakat is not repaid the second time. What did we say? If you use personal reasoning, only a kafir can stop your zakat payment. As long as they're not a kafir, right? As long as it could be a rich person, it could be your wife, it could be your husband, it could be your father, your son, anyone you're not allowed to pay zakat to normally. But as long as you used personal reasoning, so you didn't have a doubt when giving the money, right? Then you don't have to pay the zakat a second time. If it transpires that the recipient is an unbeliever resident in non-Muslim lands, okay, so in the UK, you gave it to a person thinking they're Muslim, but it turned out that they're not Muslim, right? The one who made the payment may not demand repayment, okay? You cannot ask for the money back. As for the Hashabite, right, as for the Sayyids, there are two narrations. Repayment, so that means you may ask for the payment back or you may not ask for the payment back. There are two narrations, as in there's a difference in opinion. Are you able to ask for that money back? Repayment may not be demanded if it transpires that the recipient is one's child or is not needy. Okay. The scholars differed whether it is permissible. Yes. The scholars differed whether it is permissible for the ineligible recipient to keep the zakat payment. So this person who got this money, so you gave them that money, right? We're not talking about you, we're talking about that person. Are they allowed to keep the money? Because you gave it to them, right? As zakat, are they allowed to keep the money? From those that did not deem it agreeable, some opined that the ineligible recipient gives it away as charity, and others opined it is returned to the zakat payer. So what you should do is, that money is basically, you're not allowed to keep it. It's basically haram for you, right? Because it was given to you as zakat and you're not eligible for zakat, right? So you must give it back to the person or you must give it in charity. Okay, so there's two opinions. Obviously, we would say give it back to the zakat person, the person paying zakat wise, so that they give it to a poor person and they pay their zakat off, right? It is disliked to pay an amount equal to or more than the zakat threshold to one needy individual, unless the recipient is in debt. Okay, disliked. So it's allowed, right? But it's disliked to make somebody rich by giving them zakat. Okay, so let's say the zakat threshold, we said for silver that's about 1,200, less than 1,200 pounds, but for gold that's almost 10 grand, right? So let's say you were giving your zakat and to just one person you gave 10 grand. Okay, it's allowed, but it's disliked. Why? Because you could have helped a lot more people. Okay, obviously if that person has debt, then you may give that much money. Why? Because this person needs a lot of money, right? Or has a family. Okay, so you're giving it to a father which is poor, right? Such that if the payment was divided amongst them, what is bestowed on each of them is less than the zakat threshold. Okay, it is disliked to transfer the zakat payment from the country in which the assets are to another country. So you can't pay zakat to another country unless zakat is paid to one's relatives. Okay, so you may send money abroad, your zakat abroad, if it's to relatives or those who are needier, right? If you're sending it to Gaza, to Sudan, may Allah help them all. If you're sending it somehow to the Uyghur Muslims, which I don't think you can, and the others around the world, those in Yemen, those in other places which are suffering, right? You may send zakat to them. In fact, you should send zakat to them, right? Number 3, you can send it to the more righteous people. So if the Muslims around you aren't righteous people, you don't want to support them with what they're doing, you may send it overseas to more righteous people, okay? More scrupulous in religious matters, okay? If everyone around you, the Muslims around you, are sinners, you may send it to non-sinners, right? More beneficial for Muslims, okay? If you feel like there's going to be more benefit by sending it abroad. And how does that work? So maybe you only have to give £100 in zakat. £100 in zakat, right, is only going to feed somebody a couple days in the UK, right? Okay, if they have access to a kitchen and they can cook, then it'll feed them for a while, but still £100 is not enough for much. However, let's say you send that same £100 to, let's say, Yemen or to Pakistan or to India or wherever. Now, I don't know the conversion rates, but because of the currency, right, they receive a lot more. Right, so you might be able to feed someone in England for a week, but if you send it, for example, to Yemen, they may be able to eat for a month. So obviously that is more beneficial, right? So you can do that. Number 6, students of religious sciences or aesthetics, right? You can send money abroad to support these people, or paid before the completion of a lunar year. If you're paying your zakat early, you may also send it abroad. If someone actually possesses or is able to possess sustenance for a day, okay, so he's healthy and he's able to earn a livelihood, okay, if someone actually possesses or is able to possess sustenance for a day, one day, Okay, so today you have enough money to eat today. It is not permissible for him to seek charity for sustenance. Okay. If one has sustenance for the day but needs something else, for example, clothes, it is permissible to ask for the other need. Okay. But you can't ask money for food when you have enough money for that day. Okay. What does this mean? A lot of poor people, they find that if they ask money for food, they receive more money, right? So they will lie and they will say, I've got nothing to eat, even though they've got enough money, £5, to eat for today, right? But they say, I've got nothing to eat, please give me money for food. And that way they receive more money. So this isn't allowed, okay? What you can do is you can say, I've got enough money for food, but I need money for clothes, and you can take money for clothes. And then once you've got enough money for clothes, you can ask for something else if you need it, right? If you're needy. It is sinful to give to such a person if one is aware of his state. Do not give it to these poor people if you know that they're faking it, okay? However, it is permissible for such a person in strict need to seek charity for clothing, rent for accommodation, and necessary repairs to a house, okay? A person busied from earning a livelihood due to jihad may ask for sustenance if he is in need. Otherwise, you're not allowed, okay? So begging in Islam is a big no-no. It is permissible to give zakat to children, okay, for the occasion of Eid. So what this is basically telling you is that it's not haram, right? So we're not saying that these people are eligible. We've already said that they're eligible. But giving them zakat for the occasion of Eid is allowed, okay? So nobody can come around and basically say this is a bid'ah, you can't do this, basically, right? Number two, the bearer of good news. You can give your zakat to the bearer of good news, obviously with the caveat that they're eligible for zakat. Like, this is the whole subject, yeah? So they're a poor person and they're giving you good news. You can give them zakat. There's nothing wrong with this, right? Number three, one who gifts a firstling, okay? So the first produce of the season that has no value. I'm not sure what this means, but you're allowed to give zakat to them. One who wakes people up for the pre-dawn meal in Ramadan, a servant who bears a gift, or if the teacher pays zakat to his deputy, okay? If it is such that the deputy would still work for him even if he did not pay him, so a volunteer deputy, yeah, then the payment is valid. Otherwise, if it's an employee, it is not valid, right? If one places money on the palm of one's hand and the needy sees it with one's consent, and one intends zakat upon setting aside the money or after the seizure, as long as the money remains in the ownership of the needy, the zakat payment is valid, okay? So if you put your zakat money in your hand and a poor person took it and you intended zakat, that's fine. If money is dropped onto the ground and a needy individual picks it up, zakat is valid if the owner provides consent whilst the money is in the possession of the needy individual. And the owner knows the needy individual. It can't be a stranger. However, if he does not know the needy individual, so you return to the place the money was dropped and he does not find it, but then a person tells them that a needy individual who he does not know picked it up, zakat is not valid, even if he gives consent. You need to know the person. It is recommended to give as charity that which is in excess of one's own sufficiency and the sufficiency of one's dependents. Pay attention to this. It is recommended to give as charity that which is in excess of one's own sufficiency and the sufficiency of one's dependents. However, it is sinful to give in charity that which reduces the sufficient provisions of one's dependents. Okay? What we mean is sufficient is if you give this charity, if your children are going to be hungry, we're not saying your children aren't going to be able to get the donuts that they like. We're saying your children are going to be hungry. Then obviously you'll be sinful if you give that money, right? Whoever wishes to give all his wealth in charity, and obviously he doesn't have dependents, yeah? Whoever wishes to give all his wealth in charity, and he knows that he excels in reliance upon Allah, and he will be patient from seeking charity, so he won't become a beggar, right? Then he may do so. Otherwise, it is not permissible. If you're going to beg for money, don't give away all your money to sadaqah, right? It is disliked for the one who has no patience with scarcity to reduce that which is for one's own maintenance below an amount that is completely sufficient. Okay, so if you are someone who is not patient with being hungry, not patient with being poor, then you are not allowed to make yourself poor. And then it is optimal for the one making a voluntary charitable payment to intend it as being on behalf of all believing men and women, as this reward reaches them without reducing anything from his reward. So you can do it on behalf of your family, on behalf of all of the Muslims, behalf of your teachers and your shuyukh and all of these people. That's completely fine. So we won't start this chapter, the charity of Eid al-Fitr. We'll stop here, inshallah. This was an important subject. So many of us nowadays are eligible to receive zakat, but remember, we're not able to ask for it. So there's a difference. We may be eligible to receive zakat, but we're not allowed to ask for it. You have to be careful of this, okay? We said there are two. The important thing to remember, take away from this lesson is, right, there are two thresholds in zakat. One is the threshold for paying zakat, and two is the threshold for receiving zakat. It's possible that a person is not able to give zakat, but neither are they able to receive zakat. This is possible, okay? So the person, other than his basic needs, he may have a second car, a third car. He may have a bunch of books that he doesn't need. He may have a bunch of clothes. He may have a bunch of shoes. None of this will make him able to give zakat. But what it will do is stop him from being able to receive zakat, because it's other than his basic needs. So this is the important takeaway from this lesson. So if a person, other than his basic needs, has what we call money, which is able to increase, right? So silver, gold, and trading chattel. This person is rich and they need to give zakat. Obviously, they can't receive zakat. But a person who doesn't have this, if other than their basic needs, they have items, so he has a second dishwasher, a third dishwasher, he has a second house, a third house, right? Without the intention of trade with these houses, or he has land. This will stop him from, again, this won't make him eligible to pay zakat, but it will stop him from receiving zakat. So those who can receive zakat are two people, the needy and the miskin, the destitute. The destitute is easy, they literally own nothing. They may receive zakat, obviously. The needy person is, they have basic needs, but other than their basic needs, they do not reach the zakat threshold. So this person is needy. They may receive zakat, but they are not allowed to ask for it. The only person able to ask for zakat is a person that is absolutely destitute and does not have enough money for food that day or clothing. They may ask for money. So you're not allowed to beg. Okay? So make sure that even if you're able to receive zakat, you don't ask for it. If someone decides to give it to you because they know your situation, you can take it, but you're not allowed to ask for it. So we'll end here, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا إن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الفاتحة مع السلامة.